Nancy Pelosi and House Democrats have officially announced they'll be moving forward with articles of impeachment against Donald Trump. I want to show you that video of Pelosi announcing the impeachment, and then I want to do three things in this video. First, I want to briefly go through sort of what's the process, what's going to happen next, what can you expect to see over the next coming weeks, and then second, I want to give you my take on how I think we got here, specifically from the Democratic side, and I'm going to argue that the reason why impeachment became an inevitability for Democrats is precisely because they have refused and continue to refuse to be a serious and legitimate opposition party to the Republicans and to fight back against neoliberal nonsense. And then third, I want to briefly give you my take, my sort of overall take on the issue of impeachment, which might surprise you. So stick around for that. Here is Speaker Pelosi.
The president leaves us no choice but to act because he is trying to corrupt once again the election for his own benefit. The president has engaged in abuse of power, undermining our national security and jeopardizing the integrity of our elections. His actions are in defiance of the vision of our founders and the oath of office that he takes to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. Sadly, but with confidence and humility, with allegiance to our founders and a heart full of love for America, today I am asking our chairman to proceed with articles of impeachment. I commend our committee chairs and our members for their somber approach to actions which I wish the president had not made necessary. In signing the Declaration of Independence, our founders invoked a firm reliance on divine providence. Democrats too are prayerful, and we will proceed in a manner worthy of our oath of office to support and defend the Constitution of the United States from all enemies, foreign and domestic. So help us God. Thank you.
So you can see there Nancy Pelosi announcing impeachment. And by the way, there was sort of the whole style thing where she's pretending to be like really sad. This is the saddest day ever in the history of the country, when you know that the Democrats have been waiting to impeach him forever. But in any case, so what happens next? Well, next, as she said, she's asking the chairman to move forward with the articles. Specifically, she's referring to the Judiciary Chairman, Jerry Nadler, who's going to be responsible for essentially drafting the articles and putting them up committee. Although you'll notice that she did use the word chairmen, plural, which likely implies the Intelligence Chairman, Adam Schiff, as well, will have a role, who Adam Schiff has, as you know, become kind of the great Republican boogeyman, the real bad guy. I think Trump called him Shifty Schiff, which is actually a weird nickname, but actually one of my favorite ones so far. Anyway, so essentially the articles are drafted, and then they're set up for a vote in the committee, and then they move, of course, onto the full House. So just historically, for example, 5 articles of impeachment were drafted against Richard Nixon. 3 of those passed the committee. Now, in the case of Bill Clinton, 4 articles were drafted against him. All 4 passed the committee, and then only 2 of those articles which passed the committee finally passed the full House. So in the case of Donald Trump, it could be the case that, multiple are drafted, and then some pass committee, and then only some of those pass the full House. But of course, if only 1 article passes the full House, that means that Donald Trump will be officially impeached, and the trial will go forward to the Senate. Now, actually, I want to quickly show you this photo from Jeremy Herb. Jeremy Herb is a CNN reporter, and this is actually just a photo taken from the hearing room, and this is interesting, and I'll show you why in just a minute. But it says here: impeachable offenses, abuse of power and bribery, obstruction of Congress, and then this third one here, obstruction of justice. Now, this wouldn't be particularly interesting, except for the fact that these two here the first two seem to clearly relate to the Ukraine gate. However, the third one seems to be a reference possibly to the Mueller report. So it's quite possible, and we do know that there are constituencies within the Democratic Party who seem to think that, the Mueller report, merits impeachment, and maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but that very well may be sort of what that's alluding to. Possibly that will be one of the articles at least drafted. Whether or not that article will pass the committee and then pass the full House is, we'll have to see. And it does seem as though there will be multiple articles at least drafted against Donald Trump. And so, anyways, what I'm saying is some of it actually may involve the Mueller report. It might actually not just end up being about the Ukraine thing, at least in terms of the articles drafted. So, how do I think we got here? Well, I think, like I was saying, I think the reason why we got here really is because so many Democrats have refused to fight Donald Trump on the issues. And I want to actually go specifically talk about kind of a little bit my personal experience on how I've seen this happen. So when I was in the Chicago area for college, for school. I went to school at Chicago area. I took a class on political strategy, and I had to work on a campaign, help out on a campaign in on a congressional campaign in the area. This was last year, and so I picked Sean Casten's campaign, who was running against longtime incumbent Peter Roskam. Now, Peter Roskam, this is in Illinois 6. It was a longtime Republican district. And by the way, I don't necessarily support Casten personally, but I had to pick a race. And in fact, actually, I had opposed Casten in the primary. But anyway, so I did end up going out and canvassing for Casten. And one of the things that I had to do personally was talk a lot about Donald Trump. I had to go out and remind voters that Peter Roskam supports Donald Trump 97% of the time, which was true. I mean, he voted with Donald Trump all the time because Donald Trump was toxic in that district. And so, what happened? Well, all the stuff I was supposed to talk about. In fact, I was told specifically not to go too much into the issues because, they were worried that if I went too much into the issues, that voters would, not support Casten and blah, 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 blah. So we had to oppose. We did just talk about how Casten is fighting Donald Trump. We wanted to frame the issue nationally, and of course, the Republican Peter Roskam wanted to frame the issue locally and only talk about issues and not make this a national debate over Donald Trump, because Donald Trump was, of course, underwater in the district. Now, I want to make another comparison to my home district where my parents live in Northern Virginia. With Jennifer Wexton running against Republican not longtime incumbent, but it was a longtime Republican held seat with Barbara Comstock. Now, Wexton won that race. The Democrat won that race, also doing essentially the same thing. And that happened. And I know that race well also because I happened to vote in my home district with my parents. And that district, again, all the newsletters was about Donald Trump, Donald Trump, Donald Trump. And you'll remember, how did the House actually win the sort of flip blue? A lot of those seats just were these longtime Republican seats that were in suburban, slightly upper class, or well, not really upper class, excuse me, but kind of middle class, maybe slightly upper middle class districts, as is the case with those two districts which I'm talking about with Wexton and Casten. Now, also, I happen to know someone who was in that class with me, who happens to now work for Sean Casten in Congress. And she was telling me, yes, because I was texting her about this stuff a few weeks ago. And she was like, yeah, literally, when I was in, one of the things I had to do was literally once a week, I would go down to Pelosi's office and deliver basically the same thing that I had to deliver last week, like basically the same letter, just a few words changed, saying, we urge impeachment on this issue precisely because Casten was worried that he would not be able to win re-election if he could not actually deliver to the voters just what he had promised. If he could not deliver to the voters in that district that he was going to impeach Donald Trump. And so he was actually worried that the seat might flip back red if he didn't actually sort of, show that he's fighting Donald Trump by going through with impeachment. Not good. So really what I think happened is just that the the Democratic Party, the strategy that they used to win the House by only focusing on Donald Trump and not actually focusing on the issues, required now that all of these seats, all these people had to come forward and be like, we have to impeach, we have to impeach, and we have to impeach. And so the Democrats essentially were locked into impeachment and had to find a reason. Now, is this Ukraine thing worthy of impeachment? It seems like it. I mean, there's a little bit of flip flop here, but notice how are Republicans turning around and responding to this? They are often running with the talking point of, they're like, the Democrats have wanted to impeach since day one, blah, 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 blah. This isn't really an issue. It's, and look, are they trying to distract you with that? Yes, they are trying to clearly, right? Like, that's clearly a distraction from the issues. They don't want to talk about the issues. They just want to, muddy the waters with, with confusing issues about process, talk to you about how the Democrats wanted to impeach anyway to kind of dilute it. And then also, they turn around and say, well, he didn't really do it anyway. Like, they confuse the water. And by the way, the reason why they're doing this, this is really good political strategy. In that political strategy class that I was alluding to earlier, literally in my textbook, one of the lessons which it taught that, was drawn from the Richard Nixon impeachment thing is, don't put all your eggs into the basket of he didn't do it, right? You don't just turn around and deny it. What you do is you muddy the waters, give multiple things, and then, that way, even if it turns out they did do it and it's compelling, it ends up becoming just confusing and a mess and a wash. And by the way, that's exactly what they did with Bill Clinton. The Democrats, which of course I don't think he should have been removed from office for that, although I do agree that clearly, what showed was it was a very, very clear lack of judgment, unbelievably clear lack of judgment. Although I don't know that he should have been quite removed from office from that. But that's exactly that strategy, that lesson learned from the Nixon impeachment, which again, literally in my textbook. So, it's not like these people don't study this stuff like I did, right? Like they studied this. And what we learned from the Nixon impeachment is that, yes, you want to muddy the waters. Don't just turn around and deny that this happened. So, and that's exactly what Republicans are doing. I think that it's essentially really good strategy. And it's definitely going to hurt, if Joe Biden comes around and wins the nomination. I think it makes Joe Biden's chances, say he wins the nomination, hope God he doesn't, but if he does, it likely will make Biden's chances a lot less likely, because then, the whole thing becomes a wash of, yeah, look, I was on the phone trying to investigate this, but hey, why is it the case that your son was over here earning $50,000 a month for something that he has no knowledge on? So it becomes this, really sort of confusing mess. And, I want to say one more thing, though, because it's always the case that, like, what do you hear, right? You hear, we can walk and chew gum at the same time, right? That's what you always hear from the Democrats. We can do this, and then, we can pass other these other policies, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if that's the case. Just this past Wednesday, the Trump administration finalized plans which will essentially throw 700,000 people off of vital food stamps. So to me, I don't see the Democrats walking and chewing gum at the same time. I just see them only focusing on this issue of impeachment, which again they got locked into because they've refused to actually fight Donald Trump, fight the Republicans on the issue, because they what are the real issues that are really popular that that they can fight them on? What is popular? Fighting corporations, fighting the establishment. Those things are popular, but the Democratic Party doesn't seem to want to do that. And honestly, I think that's the entire reason why the Democratic Party has to, pretend to be this opposition party where they're turning around and they're just like, they have to fight this person, Donald Trump, without actually then fighting on the issues. And I think that sort of that's what's kind of going on here. And no, I don't think that the Democrats can walk and chew gum at the same time. So what do I think specifically on the issue of impeachment? As you may have guessed by now, I'm a little bit skeptical, precisely because, look, it's going to die in the Senate. Let's keep it real. It's almost impossible that it's going to die in the Senate. And I mean, if you watch any of Kyle Kalinski's videos, one of the things that he always harps on is, look, like, leave it to the Democrats to fight a war, fight a battle that they know that they cannot win, right? That like, just leave it to the Democrats to do this. Now, of course, the Democrats turn around and they respond with, "Oh, we have to. It's a moral thing." And that's why, by the way, with the whole style thing that I mentioned at the beginning, they have to pretend like this is super serious, very somber moment for the country, et cetera, et cetera. So they're locked into basically being basically um basically being misleading. So look, I you know, yes, leave it to the Democrats to fight a battle that they cannot win, as Kyle says. But why are they fighting this battle that they cannot win? Because they refuse to fight the real war against corporate machines. So ultimately, I guess if I were to come down on it, look, Donald Trump did do an impeachable thing, but I mean, is Ukraine funding really so sacrosanct? And as Nancy Pelosi said in the video, she was like, "This has undermined our national security." But look, I mean, the thing is, Obama didn't give that aid to them during his time in office, but then Donald Trump comes in and actually gives the aid to Ukraine precisely because he has to fight. He has to look like he's really against the Russians just because the Democratic Party has been framing this whole narrative about how Donald Trump is cozy with Putin, and how Donald Trump and the Republican Party is cozy with Putin. So Donald Trump gives this aid initially in order to make it look like he's really how he is really against Putin, et cetera, et cetera. And then, of course, as soon as Donald Trump begins to renege on that, then all of a sudden the Democrats pounce on him like, you're pro Russia, et cetera, which is, just a weird strategy. It's just a really roundabout way, again, to avoid fighting on the real issues. And that's my ultimate problem with it. That is my problem with this whole thing. I do think personally it is going to harm Democrats. And honestly, I'm really worried about it because I actually agree. I think that the number one thing really is to get Donald Trump out of office. But I think that we have to get Donald Trump out of office by fighting on serious and genuine policies, by railing against the establishment. The only way to really do that, in my opinion, is to elect Bernie Sanders. And I'm really worried that this impeachment might hinder that.